Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Swarm Talk. We are here. We are excited to talk. We got Scott Robinson already in the chat with the Ronald Acuna logo. What's up, guys? Finally staying awake to watch the best Georgia Tech talk show out there. Go Jackets. Scott, we appreciate you staying out. Scott, let us know where you're from as well. Where are you from? What job do you have that keeps you from watching? Our producer, he's a UPS guy, so as soon as this show's over, we're going to upload it on our Apple podcast, onto Anchor, onto Spotify, where you can listen to it later, specifically for guys like you, Scott. So we're excited that you joined the show tonight. Listen, we're excited to bring the show. If you're on Twitter and you're listening over there, head over to YouTube if you want to be involved in the comment section, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff tonight. It might make some of you happy. It might make some of you upset, but we're going to figure that out, and we are going to see. We're excited to talk tonight. I'm excited to be with you. A week is a little bit too long to not be with you guys, but we are excited to bring another action-packed show. We're going to mention them throughout the show. I'm wearing the purple polo tonight, but the reason is because my new Section 103 gear is on the way. I've got a t-shirt, Welcome to ATL. Ralph has got the gear on. He's excited. I'm also going to be having a nice hoodie on for those cold winter months that we're going to be hitting you up with. Use code CROWDEDBOOTH for 10% off your first order at section103.com. It's the only place you can get the ATL logo that's featured on the field. It's made and designed by a Georgia Tech graduate. What gets much better than that? But we're excited to be coming to you live here from the Crowded Booth headquarters in Columbus, Georgia. Now you say, you're in Columbus, Georgia, how are you covering Tech? Hey, you can do a lot of things remotely, but that's what we're talking about. We're excited to talk about it with you as well. Ralph just put that up on the comments on Twitter. Click the link for YouTube, and we'll head over and we'll get you in the comments section. Excited to see. I'll try to read your comments if you do indeed stay in Twitter. I'll remind you of that throughout the night's show. But if you are trying to watch the archived version of this on YouTube, which we appreciate if you would, also head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, Crowded Booth. We're going to put it on over there as well. And so you guys can listen to it after the fact. That's what we want to do. So we're excited to talk with you about that as well. Once again, just getting in here and making sure we can see everybody. Let's get it in here now. Here we go. So I got the people on here. We have a couple viewers on Twitter, a couple viewers on YouTube. I want to open up with this. And this is where we may see the viewer count go down. Georgia Tech with a big loss, no secret about it, with what happened against Pitt this weekend. Disappointment from the fan base as well, and I get that. I understand. I see why a team would feel like that. This is a team that came off of a emotional high win against North Carolina last week in Mercedes-Benz, and we talked about it last week. This is a game in Pitt that was going to be tough to follow up. Pitt, to me, I'll say it, I think they have the best quarterback in the conference right now in Kenny Pickett. The guy was throwing dimes all over the field. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to make sure that you guys know kind of what happened and why, because I think it's easy to overreact to games like this. First off, I want to give Georgia Tech credit. I don't feel like maybe the national media did give them as much credit as they should have last week when we talked last about what was going on. We're going to kind of see who didn't talk about them, who we wish would have talked about them better. But listen, they knocked North Carolina big time. I'm in the camp of whether it's Tech or anybody else, you have to give credit for a team coming into somebody's building or coming into their own building and executing a game plan. Tech did that. Let's start off, though, with kind of what happened with Georgia Tech in this game. First off, tonight's going to be a 30-minute show, 7:30 to 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have a break in between. We're going to have shout out a sponsor, and then we're going to come back and look ahead to Duke as well. I'm also going to get you guys a little Q&A session. If you have questions, throw them down in the chat. Ralph will be pulling those up as we go along. And then we're going to wrap it up with some basketball coverage. Basketball practice started this week. I know you Tech fans that sometimes feel like you have to suffer through football season. Obviously, basketball defending ACC tournament champions, a berth in the NCAA tournament. They lost some guys, but they also added a lot of talent that I think is going to be very fun to watch. Let's dive in here, though. Got my notes right here next to me. I think as a fan base, the Georgia Tech fans, we need to take a step back here, and we need to realize the full scale. Now, it's obviously, like we said earlier, disappointing with what happened. It's understandable why there are frustrations. But this is a super young team. This is an offensive line that I, put on Twitter that they're big, but they're not necessarily the most experienced when it comes into big game situation. It's an offensive line that I think, and I was talking with our editor over at 24/7 Sports and the Hive, GoJackets.com, about this. It's a offensive line that I believe there's better talent behind the current stats guys there that just has to mature and get some reps. I think some of the young guys they brought in the last recruiting class, and I'll say this too, the recruiting class, talked with the guy Jaron Willis, nothing changed on his part from week to week. I don't think anything should change on your part as a fan from week to week. This is a team that's young. It's a team that needs a little bit of stability in their lives, don't we all? But I think it's something to look at because when you have a young team, you're going to get an all-out performance like you got last Saturday against North Carolina. The conversation is, well, North Carolina must not have been that good. No, that offensive line returned 5 starters. They had talent. North Carolina has Josh Downs, who's one of the top receivers in the ACC. They have Sam Howell, who's going to be one of the top quarterbacks taken in the draft in April. Georgia Tech did things that made North Carolina unable to execute. Let's give them credit where credit is due in that matter and in that saying. But I think when you look at this game, it's easy to be frustrated, but you have to remember with young players, with young teams, you're going to have the inconsistencies. You're going to have things that you play so well one game, but then you have a game against a very formidable opponent. I don't know if I was the only one. You guys let me know in the comments that sat there and said, "Yeah, we're going to win this game against Pitt. The defense is rolling." I mean, there was a chance, but there's also a strong chance, and it happened that Georgia Tech was going to go out and Pitt was going to light them up because Pitt's offense is just that good. What I did not expect, guys, was, and truthfully, I did not expect for Georgia Tech's offense to struggle as much as they did. Now, we can talk about that. We will talk about that because I didn't feel like that Pitt's defense was that good. I want to get to Scott's comment real quick. Scott, people need to understand that Collins noted to be 4 years to fully build this. It's really only year 1 with Collins. Once this team builds the depth, I think it'll all come together, believe. Scott, thanks for the comment right there. Once again, Scott, let us know where you're from. I know you're watching, and I know the bit of the time change. But, Scott, what I like about what you said is last year doesn't count for me in a development year because of COVID, the lost year you had developmental-wise for some of these guys. I don't think sometimes as fans we fully understand what it takes to build the program in that manner, and that's okay. That's why we work 9-to-5 jobs, and we're not on the coaching staff. We're not in those situations doing that. But it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to voice the opinion, but it's going to be interesting. Going to 1980, Uncle Who, his comment right here. I'll give Collins some leeway this season, but starting next season, his team will need to be solely on his shoulders. I agree with you there. Scott right there, back again. He's from Alpharetta. Scott, what's your job, man? I got to know the job that keeps you going to bed at 8 o'clock. No, I'm just messing with you. Let us know what you do. But 1980, I think it's interesting what you said right there. Next year's a big year, in my opinion, because right now, what was the expectation coming into this year? I mean, the schedule was hard enough. Truth be told, on paper, you could have chalked up at least 4 losses and no one would have batted an eye. Not even fans within the program. Tech, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Clemson. Now, 2 of those we know now. One of them you won. The second one you probably should have won. It changes things. So we're going to talk about what this loss means for the rest of the season and what it means going into the Duke game. And I'm excited to talk with you guys about that. Once again, if you're tuning in on YouTube, make sure to let us know your comments. And if you're tuning in on Twitter, make sure to share this and join the Georgia Tech community over here on Swarm Talk. Let's start with a recap of Pitt. Obviously, you have to start with the offense and what the offense did or didn't do against this Pitt defense. This is a Pittsburgh defense and a Panther defense that I told you guys They lost a lot of talent up front, and I think this is more on the offensive line than anything else. Had someone in my comments on Twitter say, "Well, Bryce, what about Brent Key and this conversation about how good of listen, he's a good coach. He's a champion wherever he's been, Alabama, UCF. I mean, this is a guy who knows how to win. But you're dealing with a offensive line that is talented, like I said, but I really believe this is not a knock guys in there, Ryan Johnson, these other guys. It's an offensive line that I really believe has more talent in the freshman class than maybe they do in the current, but those guys are not up to speed. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you in 2 to 3 years that this team could be what we think it can be, offensive line wise. They could push guys around. They didn't do that on Saturday. The run game, my guy Ralph's got some stats in here for me. I mean, the team had 31 carries for 73 yards. Ralph, that's a little over 2 yards a carry. I mean, you can't win a football game at any level if you can't run the football. And I've said this multiple times. I don't know why Georgia Tech, and I feel like sometimes they got away from doing what they felt like they could do best because they wanted so desperately to brand themselves as something new with an identity that they left running the ball behind sometimes. Now, against North Carolina, they did that. Someone came in the comments as well and said maybe, they should have gotten rid of the read option. I don't, I think the read option, I think the read option, I think the read option in this situation is something that Jeff Sims can run to very well. Jeff Sims also can run the ball very, very well. You have a stable of running backs that can run the ball very, very well. So in this situation, I don't think, Sarah, you could sit there and say that, this loss is terrible. This loss is horrible. Pitt's a good football team. Pitt's going to challenge to win the ACC this upcoming season just because Kenny Pickett is that good of a quarterback. He is that talented. It's going to be interesting. Scott Robinson right there, I want to get to that. That's the second part I was talking about. I can't believe Georgia Tech fans were giving Sims heck about the 2 interceptions Saturday when one ball was batted at the line and one was in his arm getting hit as he was throwing. That comes down to the offensive line, Scott. If you go back and watch that, and I watched the game, then I watched replay of it twice. If you go back and watch it, what was Jeff Sims supposed to do? I mean, the pocket's collapsing. He's got to try to step up and make a throw and give credit to the defensive line. They put together schemes and stunts that confuse the offensive line of Georgia Tech. Now, in that situation, it's really tough to sit there and say, oh, well, offensive line should have played better. Well, yeah, okay. Let's talk about this. Ryan Johnson, he got hurt. This is a guy who's been a heart and soul of an offensive line, really the heart and soul of the offense. He got hurt. Mikey Minihan's been banged up. Nick Penley has been banged up. This is an offensive line that had to thrust some guys in there, like I talked about. I think they're going to be more talented in 3 to 4 years, but you can't get so riled up about it when you have to realize this is still a process. And I think we were talking about on our Crowded Booth show, our regular sports talk show, and it was on the radio this afternoon around noon, and you should catch that from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern. If you really think about it, I think it was Scott earlier said that there would be 4 years of a total rebuild. You're in year 3. Really, you're in year 2. Scott said year 1. But Collins, there's things to show for. The talent in the recruiting class defensively that's coming in 2022 is arguably some of the best defensive talent that I think's ever come through Georgia Tech. And I know the rating systems tell you some things, 24/7 Sports, we tell you some things, but I really do believe it is. They have the people coming. The cavalry is coming. What's happening right now is this is a team that's young. They're still trying to figure out their identity as a program. So they're going to have ups and downs. They're going to go to North Carolina. They're going to go to Mercedes-Benz and beat the dog crap out of North Carolina. Then they're going to come home and lose to a very valid Pitt team. Like Will Mannis says right here, Pitt's not a bad loss. They went to Knoxville and flat out whooped Tennessee, who, if you watch Tennessee this past weekend, Tennessee dominated the opponent that they played in Missouri. So you're talking about right now a middle of the road, maybe average, maybe a bowl eligible Tennessee team that whooped up on Pitt. Tennessee is going to be a bowl eligible because they got to play Georgia and Alabama in the same season. Pitt's a good football team. Defensively, Pitt did some things that confused the offensive line for Georgia Tech. They stymied the run. The 2 interceptions from Jeff Sims are not Jeff Sims' fault. They were tipped up and batted up in the air. And this is something where 1980, I'd love to have this conversation, keep throwing some comments in there. Tech needs to start looking for a QB because Sims and Yates are not long-term answers. I mean, I think, first off, I think Jordan Yates is a very capable backup. We saw what he can do. He can step in a pinch. I think his floor, he has a very high floor as a starting as a quarterback. Jeff Sims, and I'm going to stick with the kid. I believe Jeff Sims has all the talent to be one of the top quarterbacks in the conference by the time his career at Georgia Tech is done, if not the best one. I think that's his potential. Is that saying that he'll get there? I don't know. But this is a quarterback room from what Tech wants to do, the transition. You have really good options sitting in that quarterback room. That's not to mention Chaden Peary. That's not to mention a young man from Pinson Valley High School in Pinson, Alabama, that is going to potentially be on campus again. He was on campus this past weekend. He was at Mercedes-Benz 2 weekends ago. It's a quarterback room that's getting better. Saw some comments on some of the boards over at GoJackets.com, and the conversation was, there's literally a title. And Ralph, we were talking about this last night. Fire Collins. You can't be impatient with this. Teams like Alabama weren't built in a year. Alabama was very bad before Nick Saban came there. And I mean very bad. I mean like 5-7, 7-5. I mean they were not what you think about the past decade. So take a step back and realize Georgia Tech has a lot of positives going for them. What's one of those positives? They've got skill positions for days. For days, I'm telling you. Now, they got to figure out how to protect. That's for sure. They've got to figure out how to protect. Scott Robinson, once again, I think it's a monster win if GPT can find a way to make a bowl game. Sims is the future here, and he's the guy you roll with. I believe so, man. I mean, we saw what Jeff Sims did against North Carolina, and you saw what he did. I mean, he had the 2 interceptions, but what about the touchdown throw to Nate McCollum? I mean, he dropped that in the breadbasket. That's a high-level starting quarterback Power 5 throw that Jeff Sims made. This is also a guy, remember, folks, who didn't have the normal going through summer workouts, going through spring practice as a freshman. He is learning all of these things year 2 that should have happened in year 1. So the talent's going to be there for him to be successful. The potential for him to be there is very successful. Talking once again about what I think is kind of happening or happened on Saturday. Switching over to Georgia Tech's defense. Now, this is the one that's curious for me. We've seen when Georgia Tech gets pressure, how good they can be. We've seen that. Pitt did a good job of protecting Kenny Pickett. If you go back and watch that game, in my opinion, Kenny Pickett had all day to throw. And I don't care if you had the best secondary in the world. If you said, we're going to take the top 4 guys, 2 safeties and 2 corners from an NFL team and put them out there. If you asked them to cover wide receivers for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 seconds and let Kenny Pickett just run back there, I don't care who you have. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. Defense line's got to play better. We talked about that. North Carolina, they played fantastic. It was a returning 5 starters offensive line. They may not, just because you come back doesn't mean that you have talent, but you could say this as well. But only had 1 sack. Got Ralph over here, let me know. So they only had 1 sack. You got to get pressure on that. You have to be able to do some things against an offense that's just way too good. Pitt finished with 580 yards. Tech with 432. Pickett finished 23 of 36, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns. What did Tech's defense do? 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. As hyped up as Andrew Thacker was, and that's great. That's fantastic. You're daring Pitt to run the ball on you, and Pitt did that. And I think that's a cause for concern. Going to Scott Robinson right there. Just curious, why did we start with the 3-3-5 and never adjust? We rushed 3 all game long and gave Pickett all day. That was something that was interesting to me because I felt like, guys, I'm going to get to David's comment here in a second. Scott, I felt like in the North Carolina game, there were some more exotic blitzes, some more exotic schemes, stunts that we saw from up front. And I think Pitt's all, and I didn't go, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't do, a film study on this game, but I think Pitt's offensive line did a good job of communication where North Carolina didn't. And I think you have to give them credit for that. I don't think Georgia Tech's defense, and I'll say this is, coaches say this all the time, I don't think you're ever as good as you think you are. You're never as bad as you think you are. Georgia Tech's defense is not going to go have 10 tackles for loss and nine sacks or whatever they had against North Carolina. They're also not continuously just going to get 1 sack and 2 tackles for loss every game. Pittsburgh did a good job of communicating up front. Now, the 3-3-5, what it does is it protects against the pass, Scott. What it does is it does dare somebody to run. The Razorbacks found that out this weekend when they decided to run a 3-3-5 but against the boys in Athens. But the defensive line struggled. Both lines struggled in this game for me. And I think that as a program, you have to build from within and go out. Tech had the luxury of having some very good skill position guys. Trey Swilling, one of very talented corner. Wanye Thomas, Tariq Carpenter, Miles Brooks. I mean, all of these guys, really. And so seriously, Kenyatta Watson, the second potential, the former four-star that committed to Texas and came and transferred over. They had what you needed, but they're not executing against three teams, really. They did, too, and the third one got them. Pitt probably had the best offense out of the three that we've seen in the past 3 weeks. Pitt's offense executed. Georgia Tech's defense did not. And I think that brings up a tough part right there. Going back to the comment now of David. David, we still have 2 4-stars that takes a look at. Dante Anderson, he's a big one, and Azare Thomas, both class of 22. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, this is already a class defensively. There is help on the way because they're going to have to replace some people. Azare Thomas, people don't know, it's Wanye Thomas's brother. He is dynamic. He is a playmaker. He can be a playmaker on both sides of the ball. He's told me before, and he'd love a chance to, play kickoff return or something like that. But Azare Thomas is a very talented player. There definitely is some help on the way. But there was a defensive line failure. You can't ask and not get pressure up front and ask your secondary to guard against a top-level quarterback like that. Kenny Pickett is a top-level quarterback in this conference. I believe that he might be the best quarterback in this conference. And truth be told, guys, depending on what the boys in red and black bounce out or run out on the field on Saturday in November, he may be the best quarterback that you find, depending on which quarterback plays in that game. If it is instead Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels, Kenny Pickett is that good. He will get some consideration in the draft. He's got the size, he's got the intangibles, and he's a grizzled veteran. He's just done it for a long time. He knows what he's doing. He has good relationships. So I think Georgia Tech's defense did drop the bar on that aspect of it. But when you go look at the numbers, they're not going to always have numbers like they did against North Carolina. But they're also not going to have them like they did against Pitt, somewhere in the middle. We talked about the interceptions. We talked about the turnovers. Obviously, I was talking with Ralph before, and he said, Bryce, if Tech had a chance, and the interceptions kind of put them a little bit behind them. I think that was something that's big. You have to have that. Scott Robinson right there once again. This defense line has to get bigger as well as helps on the way of some monsters coming. Listen, Scott, I think you were in my DMs on Twitter about this, and we were talking about it. I mean, there is definitely help on the way. We've talked about Zeke Biggers. I mean, the kid's a freshman. He's 17 years old, guys. And Ralph, what is he? 6'6", 363. And he can move. He can move. So there's definitely help on the way if you are a Georgia Tech fan. You're trying to hope that defensive front can come back. Hey, if you haven't checked them out already, go over to Section 103. It's a fantastic company that we are going to continue to promote. Great Georgia Tech gear. It's a lot of fun. I've got hoodies, T-shirts, performance T-shirts as well. It's going to be a ton of fun. You see right there, the Bobby Dodd Stadium is my hat place. It's probably my favorite shirt. I've also got the Welcome to Atlanta shirt. And really, it's the only place where you can go and you can get the ATL logo right there. You see your two guys right there, Sean Bedford and my man back there taking the snap. There's Stephen right there, the owner of the company, Georgia Tech grad with the ATL and the Waffle House logo. He's awesome as well. Go support their brand and make sure to use code Crowded Booth. That is capital CROWDEDBOOTH for 10% off your first order. I want to get to the question right there. Guys, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end after we talk about Duke. Do I know the status of Marquez Ezard? I'll tell you this. He was a little bit banged up during fall camp, and right now the guys in front of him, I know everyone has these questions about the ATL, the above-the-line chart that's released every single week, and you can find it over on my Twitter at Bryce_Coon when they release it. Marquez Ezard just has not made that chart. There are guys in the wide receiver room that are just outplaying him. And right now, he is just kind of under the line. I know he was nursing some injuries early on. I think they've seen things in practice that they like. Remember, we only get to see 30 minutes of practice. And usually it's maybe briefly some 7-on-7 work. But they usually hold that towards the end when the media has left. But Marquez Ezard, while he is a talent, we'll have to see what going forward if he does. There could be a situation maybe he transfers out. Could be something to keep an eye on. This wide receiver room for Georgia Tech is very talented. You saw Nate McCollum get on the action. Obviously, you know what Malachi Carter can do. Adonicus Sanders, a very physical blocker that Jeff Collins likes to employ out there who can also get a little run after the catch as well. Let's talk about this Duke game. And I'm telling you, it scares me after seeing what Pitt. Ralph, get me what Pitt did on the ground this past weekend, or if you're in the comments, let us know as well. Scott Robinson right there. I got his comment, Ralph, while you're looking at losing Blackburn hurts. Guys, I tweeted out, and this is what I feel bad about. It was the first day of fall camp, and Leo Blackburn made a fantastic over-the-shoulder catch, mossed one of the DBs for Georgia Tech. Later that day, tears his ACL. And he is, I'm telling you, he has, this is not a joke, and I'm being serious. He has been compared by coaches to have Kyle Pitts-like tendencies. He's big, can play the tight end, wide receiver hybrid position. I know you guys have talked about that on a lot of chats as well. He has that ability. We're going to talk about this Duke game, and I think it's pivotal because we talked earlier, 580 total yards for the Panthers. 181 of it came on the ground. And Pitt's not a team that runs the ball a ton. Now, obviously, they have Kenny Pickett. They like what they're able to do. But remember last year, last game of the season, when they ran all over Georgia Tech? Duke, strength is running the football. They've got a young man, get me his stats, Mateo Durant, started off the season in fantastic form. It was a loss against Charlotte over at Charlotte, big win for the 49ers. But they can run the football, man. They really can. And Georgia Tech is going to have to up that physicality like you were talking about. I know we talked about maybe being a little undersized, but really, you have to be gap sound. You can't overcommit. We saw that against North Carolina. And Pitt, it kind of went away. And I think that's I think that's part of the maturity process. Now, you obviously have a guy like Ace Ely back there. Charlie Thomas is going to be involved. Quez Jackson. But there's got to be some type of accountability with the aspect of saying mentally, we can't get so worried because our offense isn't doing anything. Now, listen, the offense had to do something. I agree with you there. The defense is on the field way too long. I don't care how long it's out there. I'm going to read you these stats from Mateo Durant. Through 5 games, have they had a bye week yet, Ralph? I'll say the numbers and Ralph give me their schedule real quick. 106 carries, 638 yards, 8 touchdowns through 5 games. He is averaging, what is that? A little over a touchdown a game. They love to run the football. Mateo Durant is talented. 638 yards. He's averaging 6 yards per carry. You run the ball twice when you get a first down. So that's what Duke is going to employ. How do you stop that? Now, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, guys, the 3-3-5. When you run the 3-3-5, that is essentially daring a team to run the ball on you. Now, I was talking with one of our writers over at GoJackets.com, and he was telling me, and obviously you guys kind of know this, Georgia Tech has the ability. When they played Clemson, they did this. They had the 3-3-5 look, but they also will throw in some multiple looks. They'll go to some different looks. What that'll look like, potentially could see a 4-2-5 defense to maybe not beg, and give those guards essentially free way to combo block up to the linebacker. I think if you go 4-2-5, it could be something interesting. I think that this game is where we could see Zeke Biggers make a bigger impact because you've got to have that big beef in the interior to combat some of that. Duke, obviously, when you look at their schedule and what they have, let's take a look at Georgia Tech's schedule real quick. They've got Duke on the road. Obviously, they're going to head back on the road. They're not going to be back on the flats, so get your tickets until Halloween weekend, October 30th. So they're not going to be back for a while. They're heading Durham this weekend against Duke. This is a Duke team, guys, that doesn't, other than running the ball, this is the game that I feel like is winnable. And I feel like it's very important. Put that in the title of tonight's show, and you say, well, Bryce, why do you think it's so important? Because when you look at Georgia Tech's schedule, the early over-under was like 3.5 wins before the season started, and that trended up a little bit. We had someone on the show let me know that. But for Georgia Tech to reach the aspirations of, I think it was our guy, Scott Robinson that said this, for them to reach those aspirations of getting to a bowl game, I want to go back in the schedule. Let's say they win this weekend at Duke. That puts you at 3 wins. You're 3-3. Now, right now, you've alternated wins and losses. You're looking like the Atlanta Braves from June to July, or July to early August, or I think it was June to July, something like that. Yeah, Scott's comment here. I think it's a monster win if Georgia Tech can find a way to make a bowl game since the future. So I want to take the first half of that because we're talking about right now and why this Duke game is so important. If you can build some momentum on the road. Now, you've only played really one road game all year. You'd had the Mercedes-Benz game. That's technically one of your home games. You win against Duke. You take on Virginia that You know, they can do things offensively. It's going to be interesting. Georgia Tech right now is a 3.5. As I was saying, they're a 3.5 point favorite at Duke right there from Scott once again against Duke this weekend. It's a winnable game. Even the people in Vegas are saying this game should be a winnable game. So you get to 3 wins. You need 3 more wins if you win this Duke game to get to 6 and be bowl eligible out of Virginia, Virginia Tech, Miami, Boston College, Notre Dame, and Georgia. And listen. I mean, I love covering this team. Anytime you want to cover a team, you want to see them be successful, and that I want to see them be successful. It's more fun, I promise you, to cover a successful team. Covering football last season was not fun because the team was not fun to watch, really. Then switching to basketball was a ton of fun because that team was really fun to watch, especially after the first 2 games when they lost to Georgia State and Mercer. But when you look and see what this team has to do to reach the plateau of 6 wins, they've got to find a way to beat Duke on the road. And I think you can beat a Miami team that struggled. Remember, Tech had a lot of success there last time they played down in Miami Gardens. If you can get there, that puts you at 4 wins. Now, you've got to find 2 more wins out of the last 4 games between Virginia Tech, between Virginia, Boston College, Notre Dame. Virginia Tech, Boston College, Notre Dame, and Georgia. Right now, guys, I don't feel comfortable with the Georgia game. Georgia's defense is the best in the country. That's just the way it is. Notre Dame could find themselves with multiple losses before you get there. They play Virginia Tech this weekend on the road in Blacksburg. Boston College lost narrow loss against Clemson. But they got a good scheme. They are a physical football team. You get them at home. I think that you've got to beat Duke. You've got to find a way to beat Virginia on the road and find a way to beat Miami. And then, whether it's VT, Boston College, Notre Dame, you got to find a way to pull off one of those upsets. I don't think Tech will be favored in that game. But I think if you can get a win against Duke and you can get a win against Virginia and Miami, which to me are winnable ball games, Virginia probably being the hardest out of those 3, then you can find a way to really be good. Will right there with the comment, Duke is a must-win. Georgia Tech is better in every aspect. I'll also be a step backwards. And it's sad to say because David Cutcliffe, obviously a long-time legend head coach in the ACC and across college football, Duke doesn't have the horses, the athletes to run with Georgia Tech. But it comes down to discipline. If they go into the game thinking and being cocky, I'm guarantee you this David Cutcliffe coach team will find a way to humble them. And it'll be with a young man named Mateo Duran. So it'll be interesting to watch. It'll be interesting to see once again. If you have any final comments or questions before we close out here, let us know down in the comment section below. Before we do that, and we'll let you get some time. Basketball season. Practice started off this season. I know the Georgia Tech fans are excited for that one. It's a ton of fun to see these guys. They're excited. They got a good bunch of guys there on the roster. They are building back. Obviously, the loss of Jose Alvarado, who is in camp with the Pelicans right now. Moses Wright. Did y'all see the highlight that Moses Wright, the dunk that he had against and with the Clippers last night in the preseason game? Man's an animal. Came out of high school with one offer to Division II Carson Newman. Came to Tech. They took a chance on him. And, man, Josh Pastner did a good job of that. We're getting to some recruiting news real quick for you on Georgia Tech's front. A pair of Pinson Valley guys are going to be interesting to watch in the coming weeks because this is something that I think is going to be interesting. We had talked about, and Jaron Willis, if you were with us last week, talked about it's interesting, and there's Scott right there. Georgia Tech doesn't have the depth yet to play with Georgia, just being real. Scott, I think that's it's okay. It's okay to say that. Maybe some fans might leave the group, but we know you true ones will not leave because that's just the truth right now. They've got to build that depth. Let's talk about this real quick because Pinson Valley is interesting. B.J. Diacati from Pinson Valley. He's an athlete committed to Vanderbilt right now. Now, he's planning on coming to – this is a guy that is Pyron's teammate. He's an athlete that can play all over the place, but he excels at linebacker. I would say think of a Charlie Thomas kind of guy. So yeah, think of that. This is a guy in obviously that will be interesting to watch going forward. Now, the big question is Zach Pyron, the Pinson Valley quarterback, is that the guy? And I can tell you for sure right now, that is the guy that Georgia Tech is looking at. Obviously, with the Memphis kid staying with Memphis, there is a kid outside of Atlanta, Robbie Roper, that I think is kind of a potential option. But when Zach Pyron decommitted from Baylor, he unofficially visited Georgia Tech on the 25th, and that was the game against North Carolina. He was on campus again this weekend. And then we had some predictions over 24/7 Sports that he will commit. Now, listen, it's a very closed-lip situation, but we're expecting Zach Pyron to commit to Georgia Tech. That is the quarterback that they are going after right now. It would build some depth. Scott right there with it as well. Well, listen, guys, it's been a fun show. We've talked a little bit of recruiting. Basketball is going to be starting soon. We're going to have some guys on from there to talk about that. We didn't have a guest this week, but we're going to try to get one on for next week. And hopefully we'll be talking about a win. Last week was a lot more fun to talk about than this week, but I appreciate you guys sticking with it in the show. Remember, if you're watching over on Twitter, follow us there. Follow myself and follow at the Hive GT for your latest news and the Georgia Tech affiliate over at 24/7 Sports. If you are watching on YouTube, what can you do? Subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notifications, the little bell down there in the right corner, so you know when we go live. It's Tuesdays, 7:30 Eastern. It's a good time talking with you guys, fielding some questions, getting what the temperature of the fan base is on your part. I'll close with saying this. It's a long way to go for Georgia Tech, and we know that. We saw that. But there's a lot of things to take away from this team, that there's talent, but there's some inconsistencies. They're young. They're going to grow. And I'm telling you, some of the veterans that are there, and these are fan favorite guys, okay? But there's some young guys behind them that are probably more talented. They just don't have that college experience. They haven't gotten into a college weight room yet. Can you imagine what Zeke Biggers is going to look like once he goes through a full calendar year? I mean, I'm telling you, there's a reason to be excited, but we're going to be excited to talk to you as well next Wednesday night. It's been a ton of fun, guys. We appreciate you joining with us, and we're going to play the Crowded Booth outro because this has been a ton of fun. But listen, appreciate it. Subscribe. Catch this episode. If you are tuning in and you say, hey, I can't watch this on the way to work, Scott, should make sure to share this with your friends. We're going to put this over at the Crowded Booth on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, also on our Anchor platform as well. You can check us out there. But once again, Georgia Tech with a big game, noon kickoff against Duke this weekend. If you're going to the game, make sure to be there, be loud. And I'll say this too. The attendance this past weekend was abysmal. It was bad, especially coming off a big win. So you need to make sure, if you're not going to the game, get your tickets to somebody that will, because if you want to create an atmosphere, and I'll say this too, I know we have some people listening. I saw some people in chat boards, we're not going to go until the team starts winning. Well, that's not quite how that works. Not quite how that works. You got to support the team throughout. That's called being a little bit of a fair weather fan. But listen, we enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as always. Big thanks to Ralph putting up the stats and everything. Big thanks to Section 103. Make sure to hit him up once again. Ralph, throw the little graphic up once again. Section 103. Tech gear, Georgia Tech gear. You get some awesome ATL, the only place where you can get the ATL. And listen, it's a comfortable shirt. It's a great looking shirt. Great hoodie. You pair it with an Atlanta classic like Waffle House. It's fantastic. We enjoy it. We love it. We got some more stuff coming in that we're going to feature hopefully next week on the show if Steven's tuned in. Steven, appreciate you working along with you to promote this Georgia Tech brand as we give Georgia Tech a voice. Listen, there's a lot of sports in Atlanta. There's a lot of stuff going on, but Georgia Tech deserves a voice, and we hope that you'll choose to be with us every single week to talk about that. Scott, Will, we appreciate everyone. David tuning in as well. I think we had 1980 Uncle Who. We appreciate you. You're on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. And Ralph has still got to Venmo somebody $1 for being the 150th subscriber. So we're going to keep climbing on that. Everyone, we appreciate it. Have a fantastic evening. We're out.